Hello again folks, and welcome to another screencast, and this particular screencast is mainly for first year students studying with us, and we're going to be discussing the introduction of what we call the EAPI, which is a verbal assessment to do with A-level OCR PE. In terms of how we use the EAPI for assessment, this particular chart is very useful for how this is going to interact with your A-level PE grade this year. For example, the end of this academic year, you will have sat a progression exam or some form of exam if this is part of the coronavirus year group. So these particular exams will make up 70% of your overall grade for year one. Added to this, you see these two bigger circles in the middle. The practical assessment, so your assessment of your own practical chosen sport, as well as your log sheets that you've submitted, will create 15% of this overall grade that we're using. And the EAPI verbal assessment, which we're going to be discussing now, will create the final 15% of your predicted grade. We then create a grade for you, an end of year one grade, and that grade will then be used for things like UCAS references when you start those this coming academic year, and will also be used to monitor you as to whether we would like you to proceed into the year two academic year. So this verbal assessment is very, very important, and it's an important component of the overall A-level practical grade. When you come to year two, the verbal assessment will create 15% of your final grade in your academic exam year, and it will create 15% of that alongside the practical assessment of 15% and the final 3 paper exams that will be worth 70%. So what is the EAPI exactly? Well, just going to try and break this down a little bit so you can understand a quick overview as to what's going on. You will be shown a video clip via YouTube or a set video clip that we have assessed for you in your own chosen practical sport. So if you've decided you want to do swimming this year, then you'll tell me the stroke or tell an assessor the stroke that you want to see. We will set up a random clip for you and you will observe that clip. You will be given one side blank piece of paper. In the clip you are shown, you only need to observe one performer, but you must make it clear to the examiner which performer you are watching, or the examiner may clearly state to you which performer to watch, but you only watch one person all the way through. You don't jump around to different people, you just watch one performer and analyse one person. You then have 10 minutes to both watch the clip very carefully, you can go back and rewind it if you need to, and you need to make your notes on how you're going to evaluate the performance. So you're going to look at the strengths and weaknesses of their skills, the strengths and weaknesses of their tactics, the strengths and weaknesses of their fitness components. You're then going to look very carefully and think, what's the biggest weakness for that performer? And you're going to create a training program. And you've got to do all of that in a 10-minute window whilst watching the clip. So it's quite tricky, but needs a bit of practice. The training program needs a bit of depth. So again, you need to think ahead in terms of designing of a training program, and we will help you to do this along the way. Once you've finished the 10 minutes, the examiner will then turn to you and say, okay, that's time. Can you come and sit in this position, please? And we will start the interview. And it is a one-to-one interview process, and you will talk pretty much non-stop for a maximum of 30 minutes. The examiner in the year one assessment is permitted to ask some questions, which I'm going to show you on the next screen. But if they ask anything more than the questions that I am showing you, you will lose marks because you are supposed to do all this work yourself. In the final year 2 exam, the examiner asks no questions whatsoever. you have to remember the process and what you need to be discussing without any input from the examiner. So if the examiner asks any sort of question, or if you haven't explained something very clearly, you are going to lose marks. So you need to be very specific in what you say. Okay, so here are the questions we use as a basis to structure your EP answer when you're thinking about designing this. And in the year 1 assessment, the examiner will ask these questions to help you guide along the way. However, in year 2, they are not permitted to ask these questions, so you need to remember them. So the first thing you're going to be asked is, can you tell the examiner any strengths of any skills that you saw in the performance? For example, their chest pass is a skill, a bounce pass is a skill, a tennis serve, a forehand smash is a skill, for example. You will follow this by explaining any weaknesses of any of the skills that you saw. You will then move on to tactics. So again, any strengths of any tactics, any weaknesses of any tactics. And what we mean by tactics are things like man-to-man marking, zonal pressing, counter-attacking. How effective were the performer that you saw in the video at those things? After which, you'll then discuss fitness components, so strengths and weaknesses again. And we're looking at things like speed, strength, power, aerobic endurance. These sorts of things for fitness components. You're looking at strengths and weaknesses of those. So that ends the first sort of section in terms of strengths and weaknesses for those 3 elements. And after which, you're then going to discuss with the examiner what you feel was the biggest weakness, the thing that had the biggest impact on that performance, and the thing you need to improve the most. And you'll get a specific amount of marks for what you say in that section, and we'll come to that another time. Once you've highlighted the biggest weaknesses, you then need to create an 8-week training program, 2 sessions a week. You need to describe what you want to do in the program, and you've got to justify why you are doing it. So that bit is very tricky to do and takes a lot of time. But again, we will help you to do that. The final question the examiner will ask is, what adaptations would occur for your performer if they completed the 8-week training program? So after 8 weeks, what should happen to the muscle groups? What should happen to the respiratory system? What should happen psychologically to the performer? Now, all of these questions that are on this screen, your answer needs to be within 30 minutes. You cannot go over 30 minutes to answer that. Now, you may feel like that's an awful long time, but once you start talking, it's going to go very, very quickly. So you have to think very carefully of how to structure your answer in order to make the time limit. Anything over that time limit will not count towards the assessment. In the next few screencasts, I'm going to break down each of these components, and so you can have support for each aspect, and so you feel a bit more confident about each question. So we're going to do these bit by bit along the way. Alright, thanks again for watching. That should just introduce you briefly to the EAPI and what it is and what it's about. Again, if you need any more support on the EAPI or any other topic, please head to the I Speak PE channel on YouTube.